This really has been, hasn't it, a monumental week for the transatlantic relationship.
It's been an absolutely unbelievable week, because what we've learnt is that all the assumptions we made about the United States providing a security guarantee and providing weapons and being an ally in relation to Russia have evaporated in just a few days. When Trump came in, we thought this was about defense spending, but it's turned out to be much more. It's turned out to be about Trump not really being interested in the defense of Europe.
I mean, look, you're a historian, you're a writer. Is this the biggest moment in that transatlantic relationship since the ending of the Second World War?
Very much. I mean, for 70, 80 years, as listeners will know, the United States was the indispensable power. It was very generous, of course, to the world, as Trump keeps pointing out. It provided generous development assistance, the Marshall Plan after the war. It helped set up the UN and NATO and the World Bank and all these kinds of things. And this was an order, a rules-based order, which also suited the US. This has been a great moment of prosperity for the United States and a great moment of peace for the world. But what Trump seems to be signaling now is that the US is going to be chasing short-term financial return. It's going to be asking all its former allies, how much money can you give us? And in the case of Ukraine, how many minerals will you give us? In return for not very much, because yet again, nobody quite knows how much you can trust what Trump will promise in return.
So a businessman, the art of the deal, interested in dollars and dimes. Now, next Thursday, Keir Starmer will be in the Oval Office for his first meeting with Donald Trump since he was inaugurated as President of the United States. That will follow a visit on Monday by Emmanuel Macron, the President of France. Now, today, earlier on, Donald Trump was talking about those two European leaders. Let's hear what he had to say.
You have Macron coming to see you for France, and then Stormer for the UK this week to move forward.
Yeah, but they didn't do anything either. The war is going on. There's no meetings with Russia, no nothing.
Right.
You know, they haven't done anything. And Macron's a friend of mine, and I've met with the Prime Minister, and you know, he's a very nice guy, but nobody's done anything. And I've been watching this go on for years, and I'm doing it for one reason. I hate the killing. I hate to see those young people killed. They're not Americans. They're Russians and Ukrainians. I hate to see the killing.
So Donald Trump doesn't sound wildly impressed by his two European friends. What do you, Rory, think that the Prime Minister has to do in the Oval Office to get a hearing from the President?
I think, firstly, it's going to be unbelievably difficult. I mean, obviously, he has to try. And so Keir Starmer will be hoping that Britain is going to be able to play a very traditional role of an intermediary between Europe and the United States. He and Macron will have been speaking to each other, and they will be hoping that they can say that if we, for example, increase defense spending, take more of the burden, that the US will remain engaged. But, and it's a very big but, it seems as though already President Trump has made significant promises to President Putin of Russia about bringing this war to an end. And he's certainly made a lot of promises to American voters about the war ending. And if he's serious about that, it's very difficult to believe that any amount of charm from Britain or France is going to convince him to keep putting American money in or keep providing American support for a war that he says he wants ended.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned there, top of the list has got to be that increase in defence spending. Donald Trump has long said that Europe, in a sense, has been having a free ride on all that support from the US for defence on the European continent. Shortly before we came on air, the President was talking about that very issue of European defence spending. This is what he had to say.
Europe is at 100. We're at 300. We think it has to equalize. In other words, they have to come up with more money, because it has a big effect in Europe. It doesn't have much of an effect on us because we have a big, beautiful ocean in between.
So, Rory, I'm interested, it seems to me there's sort of two options that Europe, the UK could have with Donald Trump on defence spending. The first one is to meet that 2.5%, that 3% or that 5% of GDP on defence. And just look at this, 3% would be an extra 20 billion, 5% of GDP would then be an extra 80 billion. There's that, which would curry favour. Or is the second option that actually we need to be thinking of replacing that sort of US security umbrella, that US security guarantee in Europe, which means, according to the Bruegel think tank, replacing an American fighting capacity of 300,000 across Europe, costing the continent, wait for this, 250 billion euros a year. Is even the first smaller option achievable, let alone the second rather expensive one?
Well, you're completely right. It would involve, if we were stepping up, spending much more money. And remember what that money means. I mean, if we were spending 5% of British GDP on defence, that would be dwarfing the amount of money we spend on policing or the Home Office. That would be more than the money we spend on education. That'd be about 2/3 of all the money we spend on the NHS and Social Security. It'd be about 10% of government spending. But the problem isn't only money. The problem is that even with all the money in the world, the system which the United States has created is very, very dependent on American satellites, on American electronic warfare, and on American defense equipment. And what we don't know from Trump is that even if we put up the money and he wants this war to end, would he still be prepared to provide equipment? Would he be prepared to sell equipment? Well, on one hand, one thinks this is a businessman who would like some money going to America. But if he's promised his voters the war's going to end, would he even sell the equipment? And if he didn't, Europe currently doesn't produce a lot of stuff it needs. It's struggling to produce the missiles. It will really struggle with rockets. It will struggle with air defense. And Britain is very dependent on the US, as is Germany,
Thanks,
as is
Rory.
Poland for fast jets.
Thank you. We're going to come back to you in a minute.